And good evening, and welcome to the Teacher's Room at iTDi.pro. Here in Japan, it's the Obon, which is a summer holiday of 3 days where people visit the spirits of their dead, I guess. Do you know Obon very well, Ruthie?
Yeah, my family doesn't really do a lot of the traditional things, but there's no escaping obong. Sure. I used to do the kimono dance with my mother-in-law and
Oh, wow.
yeah, go to the festivals. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I just decided to announce it, then realized I didn't have a one sentence way to introduce it. So um, it's close enough.
Right. Close enough. Close
Okay.
enough. Yeah.
Okay. So I when we started this about a week ago, I was really happy to talk with Kevin Stein, and then I started thinking that I wanted to try to go man, woman for as long as I could. And so, believe
Mm-hmm.
it or not, you were the first person I thought of who I've known
Yay.
of, but never really had a chance to talk with. And so I'm really happy that you accepted our invitation and really happy that you agreed to come in tonight.
Oh, great. Great. I was really happy that you asked me. I'm
Yeah,
ready for anything.
yeah. So let's get right into it and give me just
Mm-hmm.
all of my questions are very real and sincere because, as I said, I've known you by name but not much else. So why don't you give our audience just a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of your journey to this point, connected to, I guess, coming to Japan and where you're at now in your teacher life.
Hmm. Right. Mm, I didn't set out to be a teacher, Stephen. Uh, but when my two kids were born, I was living in the States, and my husband is Japanese, and I started studying Japanese because I didn't want them telling secrets that I didn't understand. Uh, and so, as part of that, um, after a year of studying Japanese in the States at my husband's university, I was gung ho, so I volunteered to teach at the Sunday Japanese school
Wow.
that my kids were attending as toddlers. I was so brave, as my Japanese was very basic,
Yeah.
and they were surprised, but they said yes. So my first teaching experience was actually teaching Japanese in America,
Wow.
which was perfect. Yeah. Because I learned all the daily life expressions. I learned songs, nursery rhymes. I learned along with my kids, and I picked it up pretty fast. Then, when we had the chance to move to Japan a few years later, I did the same thing. I went straight to my kids' nursery school in Japan and said, "Can I volunteer?" And
Wow.
are you kidding? They were really happy. "We don't have to pay you. Sure, come." So I went
Yeah.
every day with my kids and I taught them English songs for free, but secretly I was studying what they did. And the teachers at my kids' nursery school were really good. So I watched them, I watched their gestures, how they taught songs in Japanese. Um, and then just a few months later, a group of ladies literally arrived at my door and said, "Well, here you are, and here we are, and we want a teacher, so please teach our children."
Wow.
Um, and I was like, "Okay, sure." So my first real teaching job was nothing I went out looking for.
Yeah.
Literally, the ladies in the neighborhood brought their children to me. Um, so I taught them in my house, which I think that's the way a lot of school owners started out.
Yeah.
And I taught in my house for almost 5 years. And, every year your school grows a little bit more and a little bit more. until suddenly your father-in-law says, "You're trampling my flowers, they're ruining my garden." Uh, so basically, the in-laws said it's too
Yeah.
much.
So
Then I went out
so
and
the first group of
looked for an actual school.
the first group of ladies came and asked you to teach
Hmm.
them. So I'm guessing you taught them in the tatami room or the part of the living room or somewhere. How long after that group did you actually put a sign out, or did you not put a sign out in front of the house?
I didn't have time to put the sign out. I literally didn't have time to put the sign out.
Wow.
It was a small neighborhood and there were a lot of kids at that time. So the minute word got out,
Yeah.
um, I was so busy. Um,
Now
it was kind of overwhelming at first.
what what year was this?
This was hold on, 1999.
Okay.
1999. And I was still the only foreigner in my neighborhood. And I was negotiating everything with the mothers in Japanese. And my Japanese was pretty good, but still it was pretty stressful.
Oh yeah.
And it was very hard to say no. So part of it, part of me felt like it was out of my control. Something started happening and I didn't know how to stop it. And that's also a pretty common experience with school owners, especially if you're doing all the negotiations in Japanese by yourself.
Right.
Um, so that's how I started. Hi, Satomi. That's how I started teaching in my house with the in laws looking nervously on. Uh, and then
So
four or
how
five
long
years down the
how
road,
so sorry, how long was it before your father-in-law tried to kick you out?
almost 5 years.
Oh wow.
He was very patient.
Yeah.
He was very patient. I mean, it's a house, so
Yeah.
some 5-year-old says, I have to use the bathroom, and that means the family bathroom.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going to take a detour and explore the house on the way. They'd go and visit my mother in law and walk into the kitchen. One little boy came back and he's like, "That old lady that lives in your house, she's not there today. Where is she?" Oh, sit down, it's your English lesson. So there really was no division between my family life and my school for a
Yeah.
while.
Wow.
Um, that was hard, but I'm used to making the best of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, part of me felt like something was out of control and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what to do until I made the move to an actual place of business in the town. And
Tell,
that
tell us
happened.
yeah, tell us how you went about. I'm curious how you went about because I taught in my
Right.
house for ten years. But I never, I
Mhm.
was teaching full time at a high school at that time, and doing it from after
Mhm.
school till evening. But I never ever ever got to the
Mhm.
point of thinking about going, to another location, but I'm curious to hear that.
Mhm.
Story.
All right. It's a good. Mm, 3 years.
Yeah.
Coming on 3 years now. Yeah.
And I can um, I know very, very clearly what doing my MA through a distance program did for me as a teacher. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how about you? What's the lasting impact of having done that? Uh, I know you seem to go into it for maybe a slightly different reason than some people, and you
Right.
would have certainly got that kind of satisfaction out of taking charge of your life and doing something you wanted to do over an extended period. But how about as a teacher? Do you think it's what kind of impact do you think it's had on you?
Well, the impact was huge, and it was something I didn't expect. What happened was, as soon as I got back in the classroom, I could see I could see myself through my students' eyes, and I could see that every activity I introduced uh, was going to be processed in a different way by my students. I think before
Yeah,
graduate school, an activity was an activity, and all activities are pretty equal. Um,
yeah,
but a lot of graduate school was studying the brain and studying learners' brains and something called the learning burden. So I learned that an activity that involves multiple skills going on at the same time is a huge processing burden for young children. Um,
yeah.
and I learned how to make some of those activities easier, or at the end of that activity, how to turn things around and give students a chance to rest and just process what they've just done. Um, yeah, and
I
that
was
was
gonna
huge for
say,
me.
yeah, I was gonna say, just as you were talking about that, I think I one of the biggest impacts for me was I learned to slow down.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that surprised me as well because
yeah,
I've always been about keeping it moving, keeping it changing, keeping it fun and interesting, and probably my poor little students' heads were spinning when I wasn't.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Another thing that was
yeah.
huge for me, Stephen, I'd like to talk about is my use of Japanese and English in the classroom. And that was
Oh,
one question. Okay, so this is one question I had before I went to graduate school was, um, I've always used Japanese as an English teacher. Is it really okay? And if it is, why? Um, and what I found was there just haven't been a lot of studies about it. Everything I read said, well, we really don't know. A lot of teachers do it, and they seem to do it because it's the easiest way for them, not because they have any justification, but because
Mm,
it's an easy way out. And that struck home really hard. So it
mm,
made me think why I'm using Japanese. Is it for my sake or is it for my students' sake? Probably 80% it was for my sake. It was so much easier for me to get my personality out there, which sounds crazy. I'm not a native Japanese speaker, but I'm good enough that I can tell jokes, I can tell stories, I can be funny, I can communicate much more directly with students using Japanese. I could charm them. Really
mm.
hard to charm children using your native language that's their second language.
Yeah.
So I knew I needed to justify my use of Japanese. If I had a good
Mhm.
reason, I would use it. So, you want to know how I use Japanese?
Yeah.
Of course you do. Um, in two different parts of the lesson. One part is the alphabet stories for really young children. So they learn every letter, they learn a story that goes with a letter, and then they learn the sound that goes with a letter. And the story is completely in Japanese, and I can be as ridiculous as I want, and they remember the stories, and it gives something, they have something to pin down each letter and remember the shape.
Yeah.
So that's one way. The second way that I use Japanese now is with the older students, and they've just been doing some really intense activity. They're reading at the same time that they're trying to recall words and guess at answers. Then, when that activity is over, we actually serve snack. They come to the snack table and they're allowed to sit down for 5 minutes and talk about anything they want in Japanese. That's
Hmm.
really good time. Usually I let one of the kids be like the leader, and he'll ask everybody, well, what happened in school today? And everyone has a story what happened in school.
Wow.
And they all come from different schools, so they're all really curious to know how things are done in other schools. And that's when you get to know the students, and they'll tell you like secrets or they'll confess things.
Yeah.
My fourth grade, one of my fourth grade boys told me, very, very shy boy, said, well, I told so and so I loved her the other day. And I was going, what? He is so shy. But outside, I said, oh, well, and how did that go? Oh, she loves me back. Just very cool conversation, but that never would have happened in English.
Right. Right.
So that's another way they can relax and they can get to know each other. Because let's face it, in English, they
Yeah.
can't really get to know each other on a very deep level. They can tell
Yeah.
secrets, um, and it's a really relaxing time for them to cool down before they get back into the classroom
Yeah. And
and
it,
start all English again.
that's very, very clever in terms of you've contextualized it so nicely, tying it to break time, and it's a reward. It's a, yeah,
It's
it's
a
a
big
cooling
reward for
down,
them.
as you mentioned. Yeah.
Yep,
And then when the break time finishes, that's a very nice transition back into your English world.
it is. And they're usually ready to go back. They're sort of
Yeah.
relaxed. They've had their
Yeah.
snack, they've told their secrets.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel much better now about my use of Japanese and English. I sort of drew boundaries
Yeah.
and made myself stick to them. I don't
Yeah.
think you can ever stick to your own boundaries 100%, but
Right. Right.
at least to have them, I feel a lot better.
So this topic was my one of my biggest learning moments in my MA as well, and it was how much L1 do you use in the L2 classroom, and I
Mm.
had enough Japanese to, as you said, to connect with students, to make jokes, to do what I needed to, and so I decided to write for my second paper. I decided to write a balanced argument for and against.
Mhm.
And so I downloaded 35 papers from the internet, and
Mhm.
34 of them said you should use the L1 in a judicious way. And
Mhm.
so I had to go up, and I wanted to clearly understand what they meant by judicious
Uh-huh.
in that sense. So when I looked it up, and they talked about just a very clear, with some kind of parameters that you've
Right.
developed. And so it was my best paper by far, and I'm going to
Mhm.
send it to you just to scan,
Yay.
because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd
it's
like to
it's
see it.
it's really it's so clear in my mind now that my I was teaching maybe Chuichi, which is the first year of junior high school, and then
Mhm.
maybe I would have the sixth year, the third year of senior high school, and I'd be jumping back
Mhm.
and forth all day. And just with practice, I was able to grade my English language from class to class, and then I was also able to grade how much Japanese I was using. But all
Mhm.
of my all of what I did was instinctual. It wasn't
Mhm.
based on any theory or any argument that I could, support or, take sides with. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me, was the my own identity as a teacher. There was always that I went through that imposter syndrome, that I wasn't
Ah.
a real trained teacher. I was
Uh-huh.
an English major, as you were, and
Mhm.
my major was in acting and directing. So it was
Mhm.
on stage, and so that got me through classes easily. I had skills, I had
Yep.
observation skills. I learned by the seat of my pants how to make things better from year to year, but I was still missing that big SLA, or second language
Right.
acquisition,
Right.
grounding that I didn't have. So that
Yes.
really gave me that sense of wholeness as a teacher, I
Mhm.
guess. How
That's a
about
really
you?
good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I love talking about instincts because the degree that I did at Temple was very uh, quantitative. It was all
Yes.
really, a lot of it was about numbers, a lot of it was about empirical research, and the
Yes.
grammar teacher that we spoke of early was especially um, had a strong opinion about instinct. And she said, "You're not here to study instinct." She said, "You're teachers, you all have been teachers for many years, and I trust that you all have good instincts and are able to motivate your students. What we're doing here is not about instinct, and I don't want to hear another word about it. You shut up."
Wow.
For that entire year. Yeah. And at the end of the year, I was back in the classroom and I could look back and see which of my instincts were spot on, which of my instincts I could now justify with SLA theory. And I think to better understand the place of instincts in the classroom, this is one thing I was thinking about this week. If you say there's no room for instincts in teaching,
Yeah.
then you're unable to be spontaneous and go with the flow. And for me, that's where instinct takes over. You have good curriculum, you have good teaching strategies. That's not necessarily instinct. But when things go wrong and something unexpected happens, or something unexpected happens in a good way, you need to be able to instantaneously take that somewhere to a good place. And that's instinct. To be able to say,
Yeah.
okay, I can go with this
Yeah.
and take it here right now and know that it's going to work. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad I can do that. And still, that was nothing that I learned in university either.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so I
I
feel
would
now I can make those things work together.
I would add on top of that that you and I agree 100% on everything you just said about instinct. And I guess for me, it was learning to trust my instincts which I always questioned. If I'm not
Mm-hmm.
hardcore teaching, and if I
Mm-hmm.
am I taking a break or escaping because suddenly everybody's looking at Hiroko in the classroom because she's just whined about something in front of the whole class, and I could jump on that and engage with her, bring the whole class into that moment and bring it back to what we were doing. And everybody was thrilled because we weren't studying per se. We were talking about
Right.
why Hiroko was hungry and what we should all do about that, or what she should have done about that, and tie it into whatever the lesson was about. Um, so I very much learned how to trust those instincts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I I Charles Adamson is a retired teacher, who was, I don't remember where he was, maybe up in Sendai area. He's now down in south of Japan. Charles Adamson, if anybody looks him up, he was a great guy. But he brought up this line which still haunts me to this day. But he said, "When is teaching not teaching? And when is not teaching teaching?"
Ah, oh, that's interesting.
Isn't it?
Right, right. I think not teaching is when suddenly, suddenly what you've planned and what you had in your head flies out of your head, and all of a sudden you're going with what's happening now, and it
Yeah,
happens naturally. I love
yeah,
it when that happens.
yeah,
Doesn't happen in every class. Uh, but when it does, it's
yeah,
fabulous. And that's
yeah,
one of the good things about being a private school owner is that I have the freedom to go with things like that.
yeah,
Something a
yeah,
student says that has a direct connection, but it's going to take me away from what I had planned.
yeah,
I can still go with that and be
yeah,
responsible only to myself.
yeah.
So, yeah, I love those
I
moments.
I actually named those moments and I did a 75-minute presentation on this with some ALT teachers up in Nagoya a few years ago, and I called them slow moments, SLOW, which was
Mhm.
sudden learning opportunity windows.
Nice. Nice. Yep.
Literally, yeah. They
Yep.
and the more yo-you I had as a teacher,
Uh-huh.
in Japanese we say yo-you, which means that kind of extra space in your brain
Mhm.
to go with the flow because you know what you're doing. You've got the classroom management, you've got the lesson down pat, and
Mhm.
then you can kind of step back and watch what's happening while you're teaching. So yeah, that's a great conversation we could go into. But we see this
But
we see Phil and Svetlana here talking about the first language and the second language. Let's just take a moment
mhm.
to read and
Okay.
comment. And thank you, Phil and Svetlana, for waiting. Nice to see you, Michael and Satomi as well.
Mm. Yeah. As a private language school owner, yeah, using the learner's L1, uh, I feel okay about doing it. I
Oh,
think
me too.
because I don't work for a chain school. Working for a chain school, you're locked into their philosophy, and a lot of them don't allow any use of the student's L1 at all. Um,
Yeah, and
so
and I think that
I don't think that situation is changing at all. That's why there's such a big difference between private eikaiwa schools that are chain schools that are owned by corporations, um, and privately owned smaller schools that are run by individuals.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, as Svetlana, sort of halfway through the chat, Svetlana said PH, which is Philip. Philip
Mhm.
Kerr is a great proponent of using L1, and he actually did one of our iTDi courses
Right.
on
I remember that.
using L1. Yeah, and I go back to Penny Ur, who
Mhm.
I quote in the first line of that essay I'm going to send to you. She said, "There's nothing we should never do in the classroom. We should
Right.
use every tool at our disposal, and the L1 in a monolingual classroom, you know, the L1 is just another tool that we have, that we should be ready and willing to use as much as we use the whiteboard and the sunshine coming through the window and everything else at our disposal." And so I'm
Mhm.
very much in agreement with that.
Right, right.
Yeah. Um,
I took an iTDI course with Caroline Lindsay,
yeah.
and it was about seeing the students' natural resources.
Yes.
And one of the things she said was their L1 is their greatest resource, and you don't
Yeah.
ever deny a child access to that. That's their
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
Um,
Great. Yeah.
and actually, she motivated me to take a survey of all the mothers in my school to see what other hidden resources were out there beyond the L1. So I asked all the parents, have you spent time abroad? Have you studied in an international high school? Does your father go abroad on business? Is one parent non Japanese? Is any other family member non Japanese? How many other languages are spoken in your family? What are they? And at that time, we had a lot of students in the school, and every parent filled out the questionnaire. What I learned
Wow.
was pretty shocking. What I learned was my student base was pretty much 100% Japanese, Japanese. Not
Wow.
even a lot of fathers going abroad on business.
Wow.
And I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
I think probably demographics have changed. I think if I did
Yeah.
the same survey again now, I would find a lot more families with a connection to the English language. Um, and
Yeah.
even if it's just the father goes abroad on business, that child has a little bit of something that other students might not have.
Yeah.
So those things are all important to know too.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you got that nudge, that idea from Caroline.
Yeah, it was a great class.
Mm.
It was a great class.
Mm. I can't believe we're running out of time so quickly, and I
That was
wanna,
fast.
wasn't it? Um,
It was
I
very
want to
fast,
kind
yeah.
of get into, I want to kind of get into your students and what you think about teaching and learning, and um, I'm gonna give up on trying to get through it all, but let's just start with our. Am I correct in thinking that you're mostly young learners teaching, or that's where most of your interest is, or not?
I would say 70% of my students are between 4 years old and junior high first year. So yeah, the other 30% would be high school, college age, and adult. So yeah, mostly young learners.
And I did that for 9 years and learned to
Hmm.
do it pretty well in the elementary school, but I think
Hmm.
I never loved it at all. I just learned how to do it.
Really?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so where's your heart in
Oh,
teaching?
I
Is
love
it
it.
with the kids?
Oh, I love it. My heart is with the kids. And
Okay.
that's what set
Okay.
me apart in graduate school is my other classmates were ready to go on to become college adjuncts. They all wanted to move into becoming associate professors.
Right.
And I was the only one that said, no, I want to go back and restart my language school and work with
Good.
small
Good.
children.
Yeah.
Um, And one reason is, uh, when you're working with college students, and I know that's what you do mainly now,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're starting with language habits that have already been formed.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that a lot of what you do is correcting errors that might have already been there, working with what you have.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Whereas I start out with 4-year-olds who come to me and generally stay with me for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about teaching pronunciation, Steve.
Yeah.
Um, so I enjoyed all my pronunciation classes, but I thought that's one thing I don't have to do,
Yeah.
literally. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's the strongest case where private language schools always meet with success. If kids start early and continue, they come out with beautiful pronunciation and listening skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and if they have bad habits, hey, it's up to you to catch them before they turn
Yeah.
into bad habits, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it's really exciting to me working with kids. You have a
Yeah.
chance to
You have, yeah, you have
make
the
sure they don't
blank
end up with bad
canvas.
habits. Yeah, sure. I didn't
Yes.
want to say that, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also the spontaneity, I really enjoy not knowing what's going to happen. I once had a
Yeah.
boy, he came from the lizard races. Who knew there were lizard races in my town? He had a big pet bottle full of lizards in his backpack, which tipped over during the lesson. And my assistant said, "Why are there lizards on this carpet?" And I looked, and it wasn't just a few lizards, Stephen. It was probably 20 to 30 small lizards. Now, that would have been a teaching moment if I could have kept my head. I was screaming. I was on top of the table. There were lizards running all over the school. I'm
Right.
guessing you don't deal with that in college.
Not you did remind me when I taught at the elementary school, I taught grade 1 just for the first year, and my
Hmm.
partner loved teaching them, and I just didn't enjoy it. And I remember one little boy barked at me for the first 6 months. We were on a and then years later I thought maybe he thought he was talking a foreign language to me,
Right,
but he
right.
consistently, I had him once a week and he barked at me, and that's all he did.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a group of girls that insisted on speaking cat with me for a few years. Maybe
Yeah.
Satomi remembers them. And they
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
actually crawl into the school as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it freaks out some adults.
It
But
freaked
I'm
me out.
actually using I freaked you out. I'm actually using really kid-friendly materials, really fun, sort of fantasy curriculum materials this year as well.
Yeah.
It's more
Yeah.
about animals than people. And I'm really enjoying where that's going to.
Yeah.
Loving my materials.
So I've just noticed Svetlana saying there's a lot of research saying that people starting at age 12 is best. Now, I don't want to argue with that right now, argue about that, but I wanted you to just start with what have you learned is important when the 4 and 5 year old comes in? What's the balance of ingredients or input output? I mean, just how do
Mm.
you what have you learned about being more successful than you were when you first started this?
Um, four
It's
and
a big
five year
question,
olds?
I know. Or
Yeah, it's the big
any
question.
yeah, any young kids, and there are different types for sure.
I mean, Svetlana is correct in that 12 is a beautiful age to start because 12-year-old kids have great strategies and they can progress really, really fast. What 4 and 5-year-olds have going for them is they'll literally try anything,
Yeah,
literally try anything, and 12-year-olds literally will not try anything.
absolutely.
Um, yeah. So For me, I have to say 4 is the perfect age uh, to begin teaching kids uh,
So, okay, what
because
about the now some people advocate no writing or just speaking and listening for the first number of years or how much input versus how much output. Whatever's easiest for you to either walk us through a typical lesson or give us some round numbers in terms of what do you put in these children's heads via experience or input output.
um,
Is this the
when I
wrong way
came out
to
of
ask the question?
no, no, it's okay. When I
Yeah,
came out of graduate school, I drew a big mind map for the to show the mothers. You know that in nursery school, it's all about working together as a group.
yeah,
And it's really hard. It's a long journey for them. Developmentally, 4 and 5 year olds are all about themselves, and games are really difficult. They always want to win. So when they're 4 and 5, it's about input, lots and lots of input, and it's about working together as a group. And there's not a lot of pressure. There's a song, and I don't make them sing. It's very Stephen Krashen, and they generally sing, and they're happy to sing.
yeah.
So lots and lots of input. The minute they get first, second, third grade, output is a lot more important, and it's a different kind of output. It's not all group output. They're working in pairs, they're working in groups of three, um, they have challenges to do by themselves, which is the way it is in real life. Sometimes you talk to yourself, sometimes you talk to your best friend, sometimes you talk to a group of people.
Yeah.
Um, so, first, second, and third grade, they still get all the rich input, but they're responsible for a lot more output and a little bit of pressure. I didn't want to put the pressure on before graduate school. One of the biggest things I learned in graduate school was how important it is. Students have to move outside of their comfort zone or they're not going to produce.
Oh, I
Um,
like that.
yeah, that was a hard lesson for me. I'm nice. I did not want to pressure my students. I now do it,
Yeah.
and they love me anyway. Big surprise. So I would say fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, then the mix changes again. Then they're responsible for even more without me. They're responsible for speaking more on their own, doing more partner work, quizzing each other, and
But
fourth,
don't
fifth, and
don't
sixth
you
grade.
I mean I saw so specifically how my grade 2 and 3 would do absolutely anything, and then my grades or my grade 2s, I guess my grade 3s and 4s were really confident in doing things they could do, and then I
Hmm.
just hit so much anxiety in the grade 5s and 6s because they were getting so much pressure to get
Hmm.
out of. I was in a private school. It was a nice school,
Hmm.
and they were getting so much pressure and juku to get into the right junior high school. So I just felt so sorry for them in grade 5 and 6 because these wonderful kids I had seen for grades 2, 3 and 4 just started losing it with puberty coming on and the stress or the anxiety of studying. Um,
Well, that's a whole nother issue, but one of the things that happens, like you said, in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade is kids that are going on to private junior high schools start going to cram schools outside.
yeah,
And to be honest, I lose those students.
yeah,
The mothers tell me early on my son or daughter is going to do ojuken and try to
mm,
go to a private school, and I lose them.
yeah,
So the ones I'm left with are generally not the sporty kids because sports is another thing that really eats up your life in
yeah,
this country. not the sporty kids, not the performers like the mini ballerinas.
Yeah.
It's generally the kids who are highly motivated to do something that they want to do. They
Yeah.
are readers, they're artistic, they like to draw, they're musical, they like to sing. Um, and these are the kids that are not heavily committed after school. And they stay with me.
Yeah.
And another thing about being a private school owner is you're with your kids from the time they're 4 years old right on up through junior high or high school if you're lucky.
Mm.
And they trust you.
Yeah.
So um, I think if they had a different teacher every year, every 6 months, there would be a lot more anxiety. But they know exactly who I am.
Yeah.
They know they're in a safe place. There's always that snack time. They can, confess what they did in school that day, and it gives them courage as well. So somehow I think the kids that are left are the kids that are really devoted to staying with me and learning English.
Yeah.
Mm. And it's sad. I'm sad to lose some of the brightest students are the ones that go on to private school.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sad to lose the sporty kids too. I lose soccer players every year because soccer coaches just won't tolerate, kids going to an
Yeah.
English lesson if
Yeah.
there's an extra practice.
Yeah.
So
So let's
I tend to end up with,
yeah, let's I had exactly the same thing with my students leaving from grade 4 on for JUCO and stuff.
hmm
I know it yet. Just the very last one was are you do you have itchy feet at all with what you're doing now? Do you have any sense of whether you got out of your system by doing that MA a few years ago and now you're rebuilding your school? Um, are you looking for anything different or new, or where's your head now as a teacher? As a teacher
mm,
and as a school owner, I guess. I've
right.
been wrestling
Um,
with this for years, so I
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think I'll always have itchy feet because I have my finger in a lot of pies. Um, Probably the most frustrating thing for me is I always want more yoyu, what you were talking about, sort of space in my life to create amazing curriculum. I love I love making my own materials and designing what I'm going to work with, and it seems like I never have time to do that. Um,
Yeah.
right, and especially after graduate school, I have many more ideas. I have more
Yeah.
ideas than I have time to get down on paper. So if I have
Yeah.
itchy feet, it's that I want to spend more time doing what I'm doing, not
Yeah.
necessarily doing something different.
Yeah.
Um,
Going deeper.
yeah, going
Yeah.
deeper, I guess. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Wow. What an hour.
Those were good questions, Stephen. That was fun.
Oh. Oh, it was great fun. Great fun. Thank you everybody for yes, Phil has just noticed the wondrousness of your voice. Look at his comment.
Yay. Thanks, Phil. Oh, thank you for your comments. Ah, Phil also made an interesting comment about the difference between healthy and unhealthy pressure and stress. I wish we had
Oh,
more time to talk about that
yeah.
because that
Yeah.
that's something that really troubled me for a long time, and I finally feel like I'm getting a handle on it. That stress doesn't have to always be a negative thing,
Right.
um, and students will still love you if you push them outside their comfort zone, just like kids
For,
will still love their parents.
yeah. My kids coming to my house were dying to do